footage was captured at 2047 a.m. A pale figure in dark robes standing at the gates of a castle that has watched over England for nearly 1,000 years. When English Heritage released this image in October 2025, they weren't looking for attention. They were looking for answers. And what they found was far stranger. They asked their employees a simple question: have you ever experienced something at work that you couldn't explain? The responses came flooding in. Nearly half of the staff working at Britain's ancient castles and abbeys admitted to encounters they could not rationally explain. Half. These weren't tourists looking for a thrill. These were long-term employees, security guards, curators, groundskeepers, people who knew every creaking floorboard, every draft. Chester Castle has stood since the 1070s. William the Conqueror ordered its construction after his invasion, a fortress to hold the northern border. For nearly 1,000 years, its walls have absorbed the echoes of siege and surrender, execution and imprisonment. Some things, perhaps, never quite leave. The CCTV footage captured something standing at Chester Castle's main gates, a pale hooded figure in dark clothing, positioned exactly where the medieval gatehouse once stood. When a security guard went to investigate, he bought his dog a working animal trained for exactly these situations. The dog refused to enter the area. The guard described the sensation of walking into that space. He said it felt like 100 eyes watching him from the darkness. The area was completely empty, but Chester Castle was only the beginning. When English Heritage compiled the reports from across their sites, patterns began to emerge from centuries-old stone. Wrest Park in Bedfordshire, an 18th-century estate built on land that has been occupied since the medieval period. Gardens designed to impress visiting royalty. Staff at Wrest Park reported soldiers vanishing into the woodlands near the pavilion during evening lockup. Figures in military dress, walking formations that dissolved into the trees. After the last visitors departed, the sound of a bouncing ball echoed through the staircase hall. A child's game, playing out in the empty corridors. No child had been in the building for hours. The staff were alone. And yet, the sound continued leather on marble, bouncing, rolling, stopping, then starting again. Belsay Hall in Northumberland carries its own weight of history. A medieval castle, a Jacobean mansion, and a 19th-century Greek Revival house hall on the same grounds. A staff member photographed something in one of the period rooms. An empty armchair, except it wasn't quite empty. A disembodied hand appeared to grip the armrest. Visitors have reported Victorian-clad figures wandering through Belsay's quarry garden, dressed in period costume. But English Heritage confirmed no actors were present. The quarry garden was created in the early 1800s, carved from the same stone used to build the house. A private paradise, hidden within walls of rock. Those who built it, who tended it, who walked its paths for generations. Some part of them seems reluctant to leave. English Heritage maintains over 400 historic monuments and buildings across England, sites of battles, executions, plagues, and the ordinary lives that unfolded within their walls. The decision to publicly share these accounts was unusual. Heritage organizations typically maintain a careful distance from ghost stories, marketing opportunities aside. But the cumulative nature of these reports, spanning multiple sites, involving long-term employees who knew these buildings intimately, demanded acknowledgement. These weren't tourists eager for a ghostly encounter. These were professionals who had worked the same corridors for years, who could identify every draft and settling noise. Something made them speak. Something convinced them that whatever they'd experienced deserved to be recorded, even at the risk of professional skepticism. Chester Castle was built in the 1070s, making it nearly 1,000 years old. That's nearly 50 generations of human drama absorbed into its stones. Think of what those walls have witnessed. The medieval period alone brought sieges, executions, imprisonment. The castle served as a court of justice, and those judgments were not always merciful. Civil War, Victorian Reform, 2 world wars, each era left its mark. People lived and died within these walls, generation after generation. At Belsay, the Middleton family lived for 7 centuries. 700 years of births, Deaths, marriages, and mourning all in one place. The last family member left Belsay in 1962. But perhaps some things don't recognize ownership changes. Perhaps they simply continue. The survey revealed something striking. Most encounters occurred after hours, after the tourists left, after the building fell quiet. In that space between public attraction and private haunting, skeptics pointed to the timing. Halloween approaching, tourism to promote. But those who work these sites night after night know something different. They know the difference between a draft and something else, between the house settling and footsteps in an empty room, between imagination and presence. The Chester Castle figure appeared at the exact location of the former medieval gatehouse, not randomly and frame-positioned, precisely where the original entrance would have been. The gatehouse was demolished centuries ago, but something seems to remember where it stood. Something continues to guard a threshold that no longer exists. CCTV cameras capture many things: insects triggering motion sensors, light artifacts, equipment malfunction. The security team knew what those looked like. This was different. The figure had form, clothing, position. It stood where a person would stand, but no person had entered the grounds. And then there was the dog. Trained security animals don't refuse to enter areas without reason. They don't feel fear without cause. Something in that space sent the animal into retreat. Animals don't carry our cultural expectations about ghosts. They don't know the stories. They simply react to what they sense. And this dog sensed something it wanted no part of. The guard described feeling watched by 100 eyes, not one pair, a multitude, as if the very walls contained witnesses. These accounts join a long tradition of reported phenomena at English heritage sites. Dover Castle, Kenilworth, Whitby Abbey staff have reported encounters for as long as records exist. But 2025 marked the first time the organization officially collected and released these accounts. The first institutional acknowledgement that something unexplained might walk their corridors. Why do some places hold on to their past more stubbornly than others? Is it the architecture, the history, or something we don't yet understand about how trauma marks a space? Scientists study infrasound frequencies below human hearing that can cause feelings of unease, even visual disturbances. Old buildings, with their drafts and resonant chambers, produce these sounds naturally. Electromagnetic fields from old wiring can trigger temporal lobe sensitivity in some individuals. The brain interprets these signals as presence, as being watched. But the explanations only go so far. They can account for feelings. They cannot explain a figure on camera, a hand gripping an empty chair, a dog's absolute terror. English Heritage has created an interactive map of their sites with reported paranormal activity. If you're curious, you can visit their website and explore which locations have the most documented encounters. Staff report most activity occurs during off-peak hours, early morning, late afternoon after closing. The buildings behave differently when the crowds have gone. If you visit, research the specific history of your chosen site. Know who lived there, who died there. Understanding the past can change how you experience the present. If you find yourself in an English heritage site and something feels wrong, a cold spot, a sense of presence, trust, that instinct, you may be experiencing what centuries of visitors have felt before you. If these kinds of stories interest you, hit subscribe. We cover accounts like this every week. The unexplained, documented, and left without easy answers. There are over 400 English heritage sites. Nearly half of staff reported unexplained experiences. That's hundreds of individual encounters, documented and filed. Not all of them made the press release. Not all of them were suitable for public consumption. What we've heard is only what they chose to share. What encounters were too disturbing to release? What did longtime staff members describe that the organization felt should remain in the archives? We can only speculate. But if the accounts they did release include disembodied hands and vanishing soldiers, one wonders what they held back. At Chester Castle, the hooded figure was captured at 2047 a.m. The dead hours. The time when the boundary between waking and sleeping, between here and elsewhere, seems thinnest. Security guards know these hours intimately. The quality of silence changes after midnight. Buildings that host thousands during the day become something else entirely. The stones speak differently in the dark. Every creak, every draft, every settling beam becomes amplified. The imagination fills in what the eye cannot see. But imagination doesn't appear on CCTV. Imagination doesn't make trained animals refuse to enter areas. Imagination doesn't leave photographs of hands gripping empty furniture. These accounts weren't solicited from the public. They came from employees people paid to maintain professional detachment. People who had every reason to keep strange experiences to themselves. And yet, when asked, nearly half of them admitted to encounters. Nearly half chose to add their experiences to the record, to join their voices with those of colleagues at sites across England. There is comfort in numbers. There is validation in discovering that you're not alone in what you've seen. That the rational part of your mind wasn't playing tricks. Chester Castle still stands. The cameras still record. The guards still walk their routes through corridors built 1,000 years ago. And somewhere in the space between what we understand and what we experience, the hooded figure waits. At the threshold of a gatehouse that fell to ruin centuries ago, history watches back. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, you can feel its eyes upon you. Sleep well, if you can.